where Israel is going in to invade a nation, or instances where another nation is going to war against Israel, is defeating Israel, carrying off the Israelites into captivity and into slavery. If we were to read the Old Testament for what happens in interpersonal relationships, we too would find many similarities to those we experience in our own interpersonal relationships. We would find similarities to those things that happen with our own families. We see in the Old Testament stories a lot of discord and a lot of violence that takes place. Think about those instances. Cain murders his brother Abel. Jacob kills Esau. Even King David, for whom the Old Testament has high praise and high expectation, we read that story about how he sends Uriah out into the front of battle and then tells all the other soldiers to withdraw and leave him there defenseless. If we read the Old Testament in light of our own world, or in light of our own personal relationships, we can conclude that there's a natural tendency to wage war, to not be at peace with one another, or not to be at peace within our own families. But as people come to receive instruction from God, they begin to get a different picture painted before their very eyes. They begin to capture a sense of how life can be different. Different within their hearts, different within their personal relationships, different within their families, different within nations, one to another. Notice what happens. Notice the kind of transformation that takes place in this passage. I love this imagery, because it begins to talk about swords, instruments of war. And it begins to talk about spears, other instruments of war. And as these folks begin to get a picture of how God wants life to be like, they don't need these instruments of war any longer. But the thing that's kind of interesting about how they treat these instruments of war is not that they're just simply cast off, not that they're put into a trash heap, or that they are allowed to be over to the side, forgotten and resting. Instead, they are put to creative use. We find in this passage that the swords become plowshares. We can imagine the soldiers becoming farmers and being at peace with one another. We read that the spears become pruning hooks. And spears, of course, are sharp-pointed objects. They are used to pierce human hearts and to render death to others. But in the passage, the pruning hooks are shaped in a different way. The spears are shaped in a different way, so as to become pruning hooks. All of us have some of those devices around our homes, don't we? Pruning devices so that we can snip here or snip there on a tree or a bush, and we can shape it in a direction so that it's healthier, so that it moves and grows in the right direction. Jesus was born on a quiet night in a quiet corner of Bethlehem. The night was filled with a sense of promise and hope and a sense of peace. He came to be a plowshare. He came to be a pruning hook, to shape his people into the kind of people that he wanted them to become. But even as we kneel at the manger, or even as we go instruction at the high holy mountain, we are aware of how miserably we fail and how discord so often returns to our lives. The question that comes to me is, if we are on that high holy mountain, what is it? What specifically is it that God wants to share with us today? I have no doubt that He doesn't have a specific word for each one sitting here in this place on the first Sunday of Advent. And I think His message to those who are hurting today, to those who have lost a loved one, and who rightfully have some sense of dread about this season, I believe His word to those folks would be, take courage, because I am with you. I am a part of your very experience of grief and loss. To those who are struggling because they're not sure they can feel happy in this season of happiness, I think He would have there would be a similar word. Take courage. I am with you. I am a part of this season of the year. I am there to help you experience all that you need to experience this time. To folks who are already fussing and fretting about budgets and buying decorations and buying presents, I think there might be a word about simplifying, about what we can do to show our love that doesn't involve piles of money and fussing and fretting and accruing bill after bill after bill that will hang over our heads for months on end. For those worried about arguments that are going to ensue possibly with friends and family, I believe there would be words of encouragement about how all of us need to see as much as we can beyond our differences. About how we can learn to listen to one another, how sometimes we simply need to agree to disagree, but to never, ever, ever allow discord to get in the way of the Christ child's entrance, new and fresh in our hearts. Most of all, as we take those trips to that high, holy mountain to be in the presence of God, I believe that He would speak to each one of us, peace. My peace be with you. May you feel my peace in your heart. May you experience it deeply. And may it become so much a part of who you are and what you're about that as you go from here to there, place to place to place, you have the gift of peace. The gift of peace known specifically in the Christ child to share with others that you encounter. Thanks be to God for this remarkable time of year. Thanks be to God for Advent that calls us into the presence of the Christ child and urges us to experience His gift of peace.